begin with a prayer in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. St. Thomas Aquinas,
Pray for us.
Our Lady, Seat of Wisdom,
Pray for us.
So, I'm gonna need that soon, but not immediately, probably. So,
You can put it down.
yeah,
Give me some too.
sure. So, as you probably know, because hopefully you all came for the talk on the 5 proofs of God's existence from St. Thomas Aquinas. Although the proof I'm going to start with isn't the proof from Thomas Aquinas, but the proof from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which proves that there is no God. And this proof goes that if there's ever an object like a miraculous fish that could only have been come about by God's existence, then because God's existence relies on faith, God doesn't exist. And that was supposed to not make sense. Fortunately for us, the existence of God is a matter of reason rather than faith, while anything else about God, like the Trinity, is itself a matter of faith. So this is just a small introduction to the Summa. I'm going to do that as well as the 5 proofs. And before that, I'm going to lay out a little bit about where we're going, like how theology relates to everything else. So I'll need the word to begin. Because God is all truth, nothing in science and revelation can contradict each other. And so our study of reality kind of looks like this. We have science that looks at some reality. We have revelation. And then from science we get, or the philosophy is more connected to what we see in the real world, more like science. And then theology combines both science and revelation. To try to get an overall picture of reality, including what God has revealed, both kind of supernaturally, like the Bible, but also looking at the world God created, which is itself a specific type of revelation if you think about it. So, I probably should eventually.
Let me grab one of the.
Alright.
Here, I'll give you that.
So, begin with a little introduction to the Summa while that's going on. So, the Summa is 4 volumes of work, and it's called the Summa because it's the summary. If that's just the summary, it's the summary of all of other Thomas Aquinas' work called Disputed Questions, where he takes every question imaginable and goes through every reaction possible. Whereas the Summa, he cuts some of that down to only the objections that he's really interested in or think are important and have some truth to them. And then the Summa was also, it begins by saying it's meant for beginners, but it's meant for beginners who have spent their elementary and high school years learning philosophy, which we don't do anymore. So we have to have a little jump into what he means by most things. And then it has a pretty organized structure. I don't know how much you care about the structure, but it has 4 parts overall. And then those parts are broken into things called questions, which, interestingly enough, aren't phrased in the form of a question. In a way, they kind of categorize a specific topic together, so you can think of them as more chapter titles. Underneath each question is going to be the things called articles, which are in the form of a question. And then within each article, he starts out with all the wrong answers. He writes himself what he believes the right answer, and then he corrects the wrongs. And this is kind of an early version of the classroom where all the students would just throw all the objections at the professor, and then the professor would listen to the wrong ones. He would come back and tell all the students, you know, this is what's right, and then he would go back and address all of the students' concerns.
Sounds like the
and ones
Socratic
that were
method.
solid.
Sounds like the Socratic method, sort of, in a way.
You all know what the Socratic method is.
It's
Professor
in
singles you
law school.
out and makes you look dumb. And don't put that in the video. This
You're
is
joking.
a serious. This is a.
Singles you out.
This is a. This is a serious to God Bible study, not Chris's commentary.
Okay, so tell them what the Socratic method is.
When you get singled out
Uh-huh.
in a classroom to have a one-on-one conversation with the teacher in front of 100 people.
Because the professor is asking questions and she's challenging the
Yes,
students
always
to find the
asking
answer.
questions.
So that's kind of what the Summa is.
It's kind of
Similar.
the beginning of it, whereas the Summa and these classrooms come to a definite end, whereas I think part of the Socratic method is it doesn't actually have an end. And that's a really cynical view of teachers.
Anna, you've never been to law school.
So, the discussion about the existence of God, you think would come first because most of our faith is based on God. However, interestingly, he starts out with the discussion of why study theology at all? Is it actually a part of psychology or general philosophy? And basically why anybody should care. And so once he puts forth that people should care about theology, then he's going to go into the theology so that he knows you care about it already. And then the sort of second chapter is itself, does God exist? With it broken down into the articles of, do we need to even prove God? Which, by the amount of atheists in America right now, the answer is probably yes. A lot of people have trouble thinking of God as something that's kind of basic to the universe. But of course, when you're in heaven and God's in front of you, it's going to be a little hard to disprove God's existence.
It's kind of difficult to say that we're proving God. I mean, the proofs is just setting out the evidence for it, because, I mean, when one looks at it through faith, there's not always complete answers, because just you say, like with science versus philosophy, things like that, you know, there's only so much science can answer.
There's actually, I was not sure where else in the discussion this was, but basically what these proofs show is that something that fits our definition of God as powerful and causes of things exist. It doesn't say anything else about God. It doesn't say anything about, you know, how he created the world or Trinity or if he even loves us. So this is like the absolute foundation, basement, bedrock, magma of theology. And then after asking about the need to prove God, the second is, can God be proven in the first place, which is what you were saying, like, do we just need to rely on faith and revelation? Because faith and revelation are good, but if God doesn't exist, revelation is kind of useless. And then after he gets all of that out of the way, then he goes into his 5 ways. And I'll begin with their official names. I'm thinking...
Can we erase it?
Yes,
Just
please.
erase everything.
Yeah. I'll begin with the official names on one side. I'll do all of my diagramming stuff in the center. And then, because everything's in really philosophical language, I'm going to kind of give you the base value names that maybe would be easier to remember and give more clarity to what things actually mean on the third side. And if I'm writing too small because it's a lot of information, just tell me and I'll read it. So, beginning of the official names is, you probably might be familiar with them. The first one is the unmoved mover. The second one is argument from efficient cause, argument from contingency and necessity, the gradation of perfections, and the teleology or design in nature. So, we're ready to begin our first proof, which starts out with talking about motion. And what do you usually think of when you think of motion? Like Isaac Newton, falling apples.
Dancing. E equals MC squared. Energy.
For movement? I guess so, energy. moves
Kinetic
somewhere.
energy.
Yes.
Maybe bowling balls and maybe even
Cars.
playing pool where one ball hits another ball, hits another ball.
Holy Spirit. Woohoo!
That would be everyone's first.
That's a little good. That's getting ahead a little.
You just want to get to the point,
what
do
he
you?
really means to say is just any sort of physical change. So movement is one physical change, but so is, say, water going from hot to cold. It's not usually what we think of as movement, but would apply under the form. Changing from white to printed as a page would be a movement. And then, but what's interesting is something that changes from one state to another is always in one state. It's not really both at the same time. And then all of the ones that it's currently not have the fancy name of potential or potency, but they're kind of just hypothetical other ways that the object could be, because water can be ice, it can be snow, it can be like in a glass, or even just vapor or clouds. But it would be silly to ask for all of them to be exist at the same time. So, for water, we have two different types of change. For the one that is usually for the first proof is like water, where water stays water, whether it's in vapor form, liquid, or solid. But it's possible for things to undergo chemical reactions and completely change what they are as a substance. And so we say that the thing gets a new name when it becomes a new object, when it becomes a new substance, you could say. Because I mean, fire is going to change wood into energy and ash, but the ash is now a new object. We're not going to still call it wood. So, would it be logical for there to be a change, say like fire or water changing temperature, but without a cause of the change? And that's basically the question that this first proof revolves around. So,
Logically, no, but there is.
what would you say?
I said, yes, there is, but logically, at first, you didn't know.
For what would be the cause of without a change without a cause? What sort of thing are you thinking of?
What I just said. Holy Spirit, I'm getting credit myself, so
Oh, but the Holy Spirit would then be the cause. If you see what I mean, it's already jumping ahead to proving God, because you have God at the end of your equation, which is what we're trying to get to here. Whether there's a physical cause of the change, or whether God directly causes the change.
You're on.
All right. So, St. Thomas Aquinas always starts out with something we can view in nature. So, in this case, he starts out with, we can see, obviously, many things change in the world. And it's easy to see something causing the change, say energy going into the water and changing its form. But the energy itself is changeable. It's not constantly staying energy. It can change into matter. It can become more energy or less energy and transform. So itself is, you could say, a changeable cause of change. And once you get to changeable causes, most generally you're going to end up thinking about other things causing it, which are also changeable, and you end up in a little bit of a series of changeable causes, which you get stuck in for a little while. And the only way to not be in this set, to get out of this set, is to be an unchangeable cause.
would you mind repeating that, please?
We know that change exists, and we can see changeable causes, like the cause of the change is itself changeable. It's not, it's dependent on something else, basically.
Thank you.
And so in order to escape an infinite number of changeable causes, I mean, there could be an infinite number of changeable causes, but they still don't explain change. You still, by logic, need something in order for any of this to exist. And this is kind of going to be the same structure Aquinas uses a couple times.
Oh, can we erase that?
If you could just erase the words. And then I'm sure you could guess that the unchanged changer is what we refer to as God. There are some interesting implications to this inability to change. So, if you can't change, then you just have one state of being. There's only one possibility of state of being. Anything that would produce possibilities is impossible. So, imperfection is impossible. Having parts is impossible. Having multiple of that object is impossible. Location, time. And so, the best we can say is that state of being is just existence itself. So, what's interesting is this is cribbed pretty much directly from Aristotle. Although Aristotle didn't really think of it as a proof of God, because the Greeks didn't really think in the same way that that Aquinas did as a Christian many years later. They didn't have revelation, first of all. And so they didn't really have the idea of God creating the world out of nothing. They just kind of accepted that it always was and didn't question where it came from. And so what Aquinas adds to it is the question of where everything came from.
Anna, did he ever ask the question where everything was going to, or just where that comes later?
That would be a hard question to answer. I mean, it's kind of uncertain because of free will. I mean, from our point of view, there's no way to really predict how things go.
But
Though
did Aquinas ask that as well? No?
I mean, I'm not quite sure what you mean in terms of things beginning to exist.
Did he ever ponder where are things going, aside from where things came from?
Yeah, he talks about how people are going to end up in heaven and all
I
of the
think she
other...
was talking about Aristotle, right?
For Aristotle?
No,
I'm a little
Aquinas.
confused.
Oh, sorry.
No, but since he was. Okay, never mind.
It would be a completely different area. It wouldn't affect his proofs of how God exists, if that makes sense. I mean, if you think it would affect God exists, this, does that affect, I'm not quite sure what you're trying to say
So
then.
basically, you have to know where you're coming from to know where you're going. Is what I'm trying to say. So, you know what I'm saying?
I think we're going to get to that at 5.
But Aristotle wouldn't have used that question in terms of thinking about the Greek pantheon, transcendent, their transcendent gods.
The best he would have thought of was that the gods were part of the material universe, and so there was just several unmoved movers, although he didn't really discuss what the implications were of being unchangeable. He just presumed that there was some mysterious category of super beings who ruled the universe and made things move. So, let's see. So, I guess a small amount of time, the best way we could sum up Greek philosophy is they spend a lot of time asking, what is this? But not a lot of time, actually none at all, on none of this stuff needs to be, why doesn't it all just stop existing in a flash? Also note that in a way the changes aren't really a history of changes. It deals with finding the way out of the set of things that exist now that are changeable causes of change here and now. And so for me the new title that would make most sense is that God is an unchanged changer, to get away kind of from the bowling ball mentality. I'll say cause of change. Which in a way ties into the second one, because the second proof refers to cause and effect more directly rather than talking about how materials change. It goes more into any sort of cause and effect. For example, let me see. He's taking on the second proof from Aristotle categorizing causes into 4 different categories. So, to take the example of a statue, you have a block of marble, you have the pattern of the statue in your head, or once it's done, that pattern, it must exist. The sculptor must exist, and kind of his idea and kind of goal. He he must have a goal for the sculpture, otherwise he's not going to bother making it. And so, yeah, it would just stay a block of marble. And so the second proof of efficient cause is talking about the sculptor, whereas the first proof is talking more about the chips coming away from the marble. And then the sculptor is what we mean by efficient cause. So in the previous proof, we started with the change cannot cause itself. And so in this one we say an effect can't exist without a cause. If nothing happens, there's neither cause or effect. And I'll just use the example of a remote control. Well, there's two types of arguing cause and effect. You can start from the cause, knowing the cause really well. So for a TV remote, you know what the buttons mean, you press the buttons, and that causes the effect that you intended because you knew the cause well. But this is called an a priori argument, and it really, yeah, they're difficult to keep logical. For example, like a jar of poison could be a cause of killing somebody, but until it actually kills somebody, you can't say that jars of poison automatically cause deaths. And then, however, the other way around, for starting from the effect point of view, is like a murder mystery. You have the body, you just need to find the cause, and because there's the effect, there must be some cause of the death, whether it's a murder or not.
Yeah.
But for television, it's much more fun if it's a murder, right?
Especially if there's a channel devoted to it.
So, and then this from the effect is called an a posteriori argument. And all of St. Thomas's proofs are the second kind. Anybody who starts out from trying to say they already know what God is kind of going to fail, because it's not really part of Revelation that we know God all the way like we would know a TV remote. So we have to work with what's been done, what the effects are on the world of God. And so that's why we start with such concrete things like water, the change of temperature of water being used to prove God, and let me see, cake. Yes. If you were to bake a cake, you would, in a way, be bringing that cake into existence when there was no cake before. Likewise, if you shred a piece of paper, it's now in bits. You can't really say it's a document of information because you can't get information out of it after it's in tiny pieces. We can only cause things to be a certain way because we're taking matter that already exists and reforming it. But there's another type of efficient causality. There's another type of like sculpting that would be creating and destroying the matter itself. And not just like at the beginning of time, but from second to second, the theologian would ask the question, what keeps the molecules in existence now and the next second and the next second? Do they need to exist each second?
In order to exist.
What keeps them existing from second to second? And since that is an effect, we can say it requires a cause. We have to find something that has the ability to give things and keep them in existence. And so the proof is, given we know that things exist, we can say that are also effects that cause this effect. But because these are effects as well, we get into the same problem with the changeable changer, where an infinite number of these would still not exist without an uncaused cause. So, in a way, because of cause and effect, you can think of it as having a chain where this is kind of the base that the chain begins, and then all of the effects are, the effect is this link attaching to this link. So each thing kind of depends on something else outside of it, to just the final link is what we observe over here. And we know that because these links are hanging, that something is kind of keeping them there as a cause. And so I'm going to just take out this call this cause and effect. We're on to the third proof. We're halfway there, guys.
Thank you.
So, the third proof is going to sound really similar, and I feel like I'm repeating myself about existence, but there are slight differences, I promise you. Because the first one is like the block of marble changing shape. The second one is the sculptor picking at the marble. The third one is going to be, why do we have marble at all? So, starting with what we see, like Aquinas always does, he notices that anything material will cycle through what it is, and so it'll become what it is, and then eventually decay. People grow up, and then die, and then trees grow, and given enough time, they live long lives, but trees still naturally die. And then we would call all of these things contingent because they don't have to exist. At some point, they don't exist. They come into being because they grow. And then once something like life is done, they decay and become soil or something. And this proof would work. I mean, even if just one thing was contingent, we would still need that cause. So, a science person like me is wondering how this relates to things like electrons and laws of science, which don't really seem to go away. I mean, Newton's law doesn't get stronger and weaker. There's always gravity. And we know it's kind of a law of the universe that is unchanging. And I think some atheists try to explain that we don't need God because of gravity, but they miss kind of the same thing that the Greeks missed, is that why is there that there at all? And so, also for something like angels, Thomas Aquinas in one of his earlier works, actually I think I forgot to mention, the Summa Theologica is his final work. And it's actually technically unfinished because he saw a vision of God, realized that words are futile, gave up and went to go to God. So it is his kind of life's work summarized. So in earlier work, he discusses angels more directly in terms of how is it that angels don't seem to come in and out of existence. They don't grow and decay. And we can call these things necessities in a true way. So we've got our contingent world, and then we've got things like the laws of science and necessary. So this is a little bit complicated now because there's actually two proofs going on at the same time. We have the contingent world, which in a way we could say, let's start with cake. The existence of cake. Depends on cake ingredients and the ingredients depend on molecules and matter and energy, which seems to we have E equals mc squared. We already know that matter and energy don't really come into and out of existence, they just change form. But we have to go from this, which is kind of necessary, but it doesn't explain its own existence. We have to go back to why does this exist at all? And so we say, we have to go from cake to middle set again of a lot of, it could be one thing, it could be multiple things, like matter and energy that seem constant, but they don't actually explain their own existence. They don't need to be fixed.
So would you call that a cause without a cause?
It's a relative necessity. This could be the physical, the theological. So, and then we would have an absolute necessity where to a being that does explain
Existentialism.
I think existentialism is something. I don't know very much philosophy. I'm an aerospace engineer. This is my first semester.
I know what I took I took like 4 courses.
What's your answer?
So yeah,
Really, in college?
I minored in philosophy. So yeah.
Oh, really?
I dined at
Also-
Cafe Le Dumago once. There
Also
we
no
go.
questions about that too.
Les Deux Magots, did you say?
Le Dumago.
Is that the name of the book?
I think therefore I am.
Nietzsche.
It's it's where Jean-Paul Sartre used to hang out all the time.
Yeah, well that's why I
Yeah, I know, that's what I was gonna say, because I actually have the poster of Les Deux Magots in my bedroom, because I used to walk by that cafe all the time when I lived in Paris.
See, as did I. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where a bunch of famous authors used to write their books in that cafe.
Yeah.
And I sat there once too. I'm very proud of that.
How about, can you quote this
She's like, I have no
philosopher?
idea what they're
I
talking
think,
about.
I know what Can you quote this philosopher? I think therefore I am.
Descartes.
Very good, Brittany.
But can you quote this one? A Lego is just not a Lego if it doesn't attach.
Oh, all right.
Thank you.
Is that on
A
video?
Lego is just not a Lego if it doesn't attach. Who philosophized that?
Your face is exposed.
Sorry, you said that?
Yes, I did.
Pretty much.
But it's kind of
So-
interesting. It makes me think of there was in undergrad we were discussing these proofs and things, and the atheists were debating these things with the uncaused cause. of course, they brought up the Big Bang Theory, which is, kind of relevant since there's going to be a movie about the
Big Bang?
the scientist who's
Carl Sagan?
no,
George Lemaitre.
no. No, I can't remember. Stephen Hawking.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Stephen Hawking. Dr.
Oh,
Stephen Hawking.
the other guy. All right.
Yeah. So they think that just the existence coming, the universe coming into existence with the Big Bang is enough to explain it, but yet there's still that uncaused cause. How
Yeah.
did that happen?
Yeah.
So
A priest invented the Big Bang, right? He found out that theory. He was a priest. I think it was a Jesuit priest.
Really? Do extrapolate.
There's a lot of Jesuit scientists
No, it was used
that
derogatory because it was
most people don't know about. I mean, because they went all over the world, this is kind of another info break, that the Jesuits kind of invented seismology and tracking earthquakes. Because they were so far around the world, they could track the effects where one people, yeah, they went a lot of places.
I mean, it's
You know the Vatican is one of the largest telescopes in the world. It's in
That I did
Chile.
know. I did
It's
know.
in
Yes.
Chile. Oh,
Yes,
you know that
of
about
course.
that?
I
Yes.
thought the Vatican telescopes.
No, they have the Vatican telescope because they also own an observatory in Chile that's one of the most powerful.
And Tucson, Arizona.
You're right, yeah.
Yes. They have a big old telescope in Tucson.
Did you see the IMAX film
Vatican?
about that?
I believe I did.
Yeah, there's an IMAX
Yes.
film about that.
Tucson, Arizona. A piece of the Catholic
So
Church
reading on the
here in
side.
America.
Yes, sorry. And they're closing.
Everything we're talking about does exist.
That's what we do
And
as
it all has a
Catholics.
cause.
And it all has a cause.
But does it have an effect? Aha, there's the rub.
Bring him in.
If there's no effect, did anything happen to be able to call it a cause?
But was there a cause for that?
That's the question. We do need an uncaused cause. And
This is making my brain
but hopefully you're not completely confused. Is anybody completely confused at this point?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sigh of relief there.
Oh, we need our checks.
Yeah, I think she's bringing them.
We take a check break?
No, we need to pay our bills.
Let me finish off the third way a little bit. There's only a little bit more I wanted to say. Actually, there is more I could say. But starting with explaining God, explaining his own existence. In the other ways, because calling God the unmoved mover and the first cause kind of implies that God is existence itself, this one gets to the heart of it directly, that God is existence itself. And interestingly, the Bible in a way bears this out, where for the name of God is I am who I am. It's a repetition of this existence. Existence is existence. And for the Jews, they took it more as God is unending, all-powerful. But now with Aquinas, we can add a little bit more light to it in terms of how revelation is in concord with what we can know from our senses, from seeing cake. And why don't we take a break and work with checks for a minute?
Go.
When you think of causes for the creation of the world, or people's arguments against the existence of God, is there anything in particular you think of for reasons why, or explanations for why God wouldn't exist? Like, have you
Because
heard
I
of the
do
Watchmaker?
everything myself.
Well, people
For
would say.
reasons for why God doesn't exist.
Like explanations other people try to do.
Well, people would.
Well, you can't see him, you can't hear him, you can't do.
And people would
Some
tend to.
people say
You
that.
can't touch him.
You
You
can't,
can't
actually
smell
see
him.
But like how the world came to be, or thinking that the world always is. I don't know if you've come across anybody who thinks that there's just always been a material world.
Like there's no creation?
There's always a.
Right.
It's always,
Even such atheists.
I never thought of that.
So
The challenge would be to prove it.
in a way, we can approach it a little bit philosophically.
You both
You say,
Do you like Trader Joe's?
in order for there to be no beginning of time, that means you're discussing about eternity, you're talking about infinite time. And for infinite time,
Wait, what is it? Oh, infinite time?
in infinite time, all possibilities play out. And so, if everything is composed of stuff that can come into existence and go out of existence, one possibility must remain that there's...
jet that I'm looking for this jet.
He's gonna wash dishes. Yes.
Possibility A, possibility B. You can have the possibility of them both existing, one or the other, and then the possibility must exist also that neither of them exist.
Ah, would that be a C? Not necessarily.
It would be, we would express it as not A and not B. So,
Would it be A plus B divided by 2?
I took a lot of math classes, so if I start going into Greek letters, stop. I won't, I promise. In infinite time, before now. So the atheist posits that there's an eternity before now that things have just always existed in. But in order for it to actually be an eternity for now, one possibility that exists is that there's just nothing. And because this exists in infinite time, then it needs an explanation. And I mean, I guess you could suppose that it's all one line, but it violates your premise first of all, and second, it takes the existence of everything from moment to moment for granted, and doesn't really explain anything. It just puts off the question further and further back. So, what about angels?
I believe in angels.
Is that a song? I believe.
Yeah.
Like an Alvin song, I believe.
I have my angels helping.
There is.
Aww.
Anna's Angels, I love it.
I just thought it was kind of a lot.
Angels,
Drew Barrymore's
because
great
they're
grandfather.
created,
You know Drew Barrymore?
are part of the category of they
Wonderful
don't
Life,
need to
the
exist.
main character.
And they're really complicated and really simple at the same time. Where they're just basically, they have existence and they have what they are. Like their nature of what acts they can do. And so they still need the explanation for their existence, and then the way this isn't two parts anymore is God is both existence and existence is what he is. There's no distinction. And because it has parts, it's part of a changeable world, I suppose. Even though after they started existing, starting to exist was really the only change angels can go through, because their only options to change, of being able to be changed, are existing or not existing. So it's more simple than water, where their options are, snow, ice, liquid.
Because they can't really change their mind.
That too.
Yeah. Once they make a decision.
So we're finished the third proof. And I think the best way to explain it all is kind of, why does anything exist? Or why is there existence?
You see, once they choose it, that's it.
So, I'm still a little fuzzy myself on the fourth and fifth ones, and they form a different structure from the first three, whereas they don't have the same like thing we observe, set of explanations that need a cause, and then God is a necessary cause. This number 4 has the mouthful thing called gradation of perfections. And gradation just means different levels, and the perfections refers to just that we're not talking about blueness, where there could be something that's most blue and something that's least blue. We're talking about unchangeable things that we all still kind of know to exist, but we can't really classify them under anything. And so, we would call these transcendentals as the really long name, but we're going to talk about true, good, one, and beautiful. And they actually form kind of a little bit different connotation in Aquinas than it does in our everyday usage, where the true, instead of being knowledge, we apply truth to an object, where you say, this cup has truth to it. And that truth is the amount of stuff we can know about the cup. So the truth of an angel is the amount of stuff we can know about an angel, which is obviously much more than we can know about a cup. So,
She just wrote a book on angels.
it's not gonna go anywhere. And then for good, for all of these, they apply to objects. So a good object is the amount that our wills want to have the object. You can think of it maybe in our normal terms as maybe virtue. We want to acquire virtue. Virtue is attractive to us, or at least it should be before we had sin mess up everything, which included our wills. And the good is we wish for, but kind of like a wish to add to ourselves. Whereas beautiful, I'll just skip down to there, where beautiful is also an act of the will, but it's not something we would want to add on to ourselves. It's something we just want to sit and observe and appreciate. So it's kind of the amount that something can be appreciated for its own sake. And then one refers to being able to call something itself. So in a way we could say this cup is one cup. The whole thing is a cup. And then one way we could separate it sort of is it has a lip, it has a base, it has sides, inside, outside, and it's all part of one cup. It's called substantial unity. There's also a thing called accidental unity, where you could say there's a unity of cup, water, ice, and straw. Once you separate all those parts out, they are themselves, but they're distinguishable. They're not part of the cup itself. Something like IKEA furniture would be something that is a bunch of little things that combines to form one unity. And so, unity applying to things like angels would be kind of how, or more or less, made up of parts they are. And so angels, because they basically have two parts, and God having one part is more unified.
How do they have two parts?
They exist, but their existence isn't causing existence. They still have something to them that causes them to be angels and gives them their powers that kind of depends on God giving them existence. Does that make
Pure
sense?
spirit.
True.
Those are pure spirits.
They still need God to act upon them.
Yes, basically.
And God doesn't need that at all. God doesn't need anything.
We need a tripod.
And so, in a way, like the others, we have to go back and say, how does truth, goodness, beautiful apply to things, but we do say that they exist even if we can't really categorize them as objects or ideas. We say that there's different levels of them as well. So something like an angel is going to be higher in the amount it can be known, higher in their attractiveness, more one, and the more we wish to appreciate them. Whereas something like mud is way down here, is not very, well, you don't really need to know very much about mud. You don't really want to add it to yourself. It's got a lot of molecules to it, so it's pretty complicated.
You don't know little
I'm
boys.
not really sure if there's any people who like appreciating mud. If they're appreciating mud, there's much better things to appreciate.
You've never dealt with little boys, then?
Little boys appreciate mud.
Yes.
I
Oh, of
think they
course.
just encounter it. They don't see mud for its own sake.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens when you have a son.
Well, wouldn't it be for the effects of the mud rather than for the mud itself?
That you have a point there.
Like under roads, you know,
But I would
under
it's
roads,
like
they're.
I guess you could say
We used to go
for a boy, mud is beautiful in that sense. It's a good. There we go. It's something you wish to acquire.
I mean, they weren't like because they're just for rainwater.
Oh, that was good, Lisa.
You model that board well,
Is Wheel of
Lisa.
Fortune now?
Mom.
Or no, what was it? Yeah, it's Wheel of Fortune.
That's not what I was doing.
Did you eat yellow snow?
Oh, okay, sure, yeah.
This stuff again.
Remember? My friend always
So, the gradation is applying to the different levels. So,
I ate snow, but.
yellow snow means
just
a
as a
dog
comparison, the angels of the mud have different levels
You didn't
of
eat
these
snow when you
different
were little? I used to always eat
unclassifiable
snow.
items, the miscellaneous items like truth
So
and
you
goodness
wouldn't
and
eat it?
beauty.
And
Do you mind the angels in the mud have different levels of these things, and they apply to them differently. The good for mud is mud is less good than angels are.
That's less good.
Is that the energy off of another?
So onto the proof itself, whereas because there's different levels, all of these different levels kind of like only something more in these ideas can give to things that have can give these ideas to others.
Just look in the bright light, Anna.
So
See an angel.
anything that has an angel.
My wife is my angel, by the way.
Nice, Clarence.
See the bright light? There you go.
Something that is caused to be will always never be the maximum in that amount. There always is something that is uncaused that has all of these in maximum in order for anything else to have any amount of these. And so we would say God is the first cause that has maximum of oneness, existence, goodness, well, attractiveness, knowability, and would say, this one was a hard one for me to name. So the best I could come up with is the proof from unclassifiable things, like truth, beauty, and goodness. So I'll just do truth, beauty, and goodness. It's simpler. So,
Put a little arrow pointing towards Thurston.
I've been counting, we're coming down to the end. Thanks for sticking with me.
Pointed towards all of us.
Yeah. Oh, sweet. Yeah.
The light's on you, Nick.
Oh.
Come to the
The fifth
revelation.
way is the funniest names, I think. So you could call it the argument from teleology, or the argument from design, or you could call it the argument of the governance of the world. And that doesn't mean like ruling the world. I know, right? So this proof depends on the idea that we classify individuals into groups, and this is really basic. It's basically saying that all cardinals are cardinals, and why are each individual cardinal its own thing. Like, all cardinals have the same coloring to them, all cardinals have...
You mean like bishops
You
or
mean
birds?
You don't mean cardinal priests, do you?
Oh?
St. Louis variety lost to the San Francisco Giants last night.
Well, let's talk about robins, or black chickadees, or little wrens.
I think I do.
That's you.
I don't know why.
Or goldfinches. Let's talk about goldfinches, because then they don't have a rank in the Catholic Church. So, there's this sameness to everything, but each individual bird, each individual goldfinch didn't choose to be yellow and sing like a goldfinch and make nests like a goldfinch. And each acorn didn't decide that it wants to be, it wants to grow the same way as every other acorn. How do we explain these things that seem to follow these patterns, like they were intelligent, like they're choosing to grow into an oak tree rather than a maple tree? I mean, in a way, we tend to think of this now as more of a form of like DNA maybe, or natural selection, but that kind of puts off the idea of why is everything the same. It kind of takes for granted that, first of all, that everything has to have this pattern first, and then that pattern gets changed by DNA modification or natural selection. So, getting down to the end. So, has anybody ever come across thoughts before about why there's design in the universe, why things seem to work the same way multiple times in a row, like we can form scientific laws? Has anybody heard any arguments for, like, against God, but trying to explain designs and patterns? Or is everybody too tired and just wants
The
to
universe gravitates toward what, or evolves to what works best for all that it's working toward. I don't know. If that makes sense, I'm probably.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm trying to say something profound. I'm not succeeding.
I think that is a common argument.
Yeah, but.
And then,
But in reality, I think it's the uncaused cause that, since he is essentially the design that has order within and of himself, that's part of his essence. That's where it comes from.
is everybody very tired?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. All right, sounds good.
You just switch arms.
But the Greeks assumed that Thomas Aquinas, all he had to work with was that God was kind of a watchmaker. And so when you think of a watch just lying in the street, you're not going to think, oh, what a nice thing that the earth just sprung out of nothing. No, watches come from watchmakers. But the continued existence of the watch could work for years and years and years after the maker of the watch has already died. And so the watchmaker argument, like the Greeks had, can explain maybe why things are arranged, but it doesn't explain why there's pieces to be arranged at all. And then it also kind of seems to imply like a universe that is directed by like a play director or like an orchestra conductor, where the directions, the patterns are imposed on things, whereas Aquinas notices that these movements, these actions of goldfinches are part of what makes them a goldfinch. It's normal to goldfinchness. So nothing's being imposed on the goldfinch than what the goldfinch already wants to do. The question is, why do the goldfinches want to do that? And so we get back to what you were talking about before, is where things are going. So where is it that goldfinches are going? They're growing up, they're coming out of their eggs, they fly, and then they eventually grow into older birds, have nests of their own, and then the sad end.
That's sort of like the phoenix that resurrects itself.
That's true.
So, hey.
We should just rename the goldfinches as
Yeah, I
phoenixes.
know.
Well, I'm sure she said
Remember, dear, the more people that you put on video, the more consents you have to get. So don't make a legal headache.
It's a common cat phoenix.
So we can see this cause of, or we can see this goldfinch life as kind of an effect that needs a cause. This pattern of all these goldfinches breaking out of eggs, living life, flying around as little yellow birds. This pattern is itself existing and needing an explanation, separate from the goldfinches themselves existing and needing an explanation. This is more about the pattern itself, of the way they act. Their nature is the more technical term. And so we could say that having the end, or having this purpose for a goldfinch's life, this plan in mind, in order for these goldfinches to be goldfinches, they need to have all of this in them. They need to be made to be goldfinches.
Yeah.
They need to be predestined
You have
goldfinches.
the natural order to go out and do that, man. All of them do. Where'd it come from?
And so we could kind of say that this is the invention of goldfinch. And where there's an invention, there's the creation. There needs to be a creator and intelligence who can think of goldfinchness and bring goldfinches into being.
A cause with a cause. Or not. Okay.
So we do share a little bit in bringing things into existence. I mean, we could say we arrange things so we can create computers and cakes and cars and tacos and iPhones, glasses. But you could say that we're a created creator, whereas God is going to be the undesigned creator, whereas we still have a design to us made by God of humanness. We don't create our own humanness. We don't decide before we're born whether we want 2 arms or 3. Sometimes 4 would be kind of helpful, but we don't get to decide that. God decided that before. So God not only creates us, he puts together the plan for us of how we are humans all together. I don't think we could be a goldfinch. We wouldn't have goldfinch nature.
Yeah.
And I don't have a fancy name for this one other than its design. It's just kind of the patterns in the world could be the final name for colors in the world. Yep. And are there any questions?
Should have a part 2 to this. Yes?
There's not. They finished the 5 ways though. What can we do as part 2?
You can come up with 5 more.
It is counter.
I can come up with another 2 more.
Okay,
Proofs
we'll
for the
take 'em.
existence of God. They are 1, that humans have souls, and we can rationally come to the idea that humans have something in them that is not material that allows them to make decisions and choose things and kind of know things that really are immaterial, like ideas that the brain has a component to, but the brain can't compare ideas, for example. Are you waiting for later?
No, I read a different on that one, but we'll talk offline.
Yeah.